So at 7 years old, I start smoking my parents' weed and drinking their booze. And by the time I'm 10, I start taking their acid. And when I was 10 years old, I'd been smoking weed, I'd been drinking, I'd been doing all of that. I found in my mom's closet where I was going to steal her weed, two grocery bags full of mushrooms. And I asked my sister, who's 2 years older than me, who's 12, and who's also like totally getting loaded. I was like, what is this? This isn't weed. She's like, well, it's kind of like weed, but you don't smoke it, you eat it. And it tastes disgusting, I'll tell you, but it gets you high as fuck. And I was like, that's all I need to know. It's drugs. I'm in. I want to eat this stuff. And so I steal like, and I don't know if it's an ounce or a 2-ounce bag. You know, I steal this huge bag. And at this point, I already have running partners. I had met this kid in Little League. We're 10 years old. We both have, you know, bowl cuts and skateboards, and we're like, fuck baseball. Let's go skate in the parking lot. And I'm like, hey man, like I got these things that get you high. We were smoking weed together. And so like me and him start eating mushrooms. We're fucking 10 years old. I grew up in Northern California in Santa Cruz, California. And I lived up in the hills in the redwoods. So I lived in the Redwood Mountains, and he lived down the road also by the creek in the redwoods. And so we're like eating mushrooms at 10 years old, running around just tripping balls through the redwoods, hallucinating, just, you know, so fucking dangerous and so fucking fun. By the time, you know, a couple of major things happened. All I knew is that I loved being high and wanted to be high all of the time. And reality sucked. But escaping from reality was super fun. And weed worked pretty good, and mushrooms and booze. And then I heard punk rock music when I was about 10, 1979, 1980. I heard the Sex Pistols. I heard Black Flag. I heard punk rock, and I was like, okay, now I have a solution. Because now not only do I have the substances to help me escape, now I have the soundtrack. I have the movement, the outlet for these feelings, and that music was.
You go, come on.
It was like it's like the voice of God. it was like finally, and I feel like maybe everybody has different feelings, different types of music that feel like this to them. But for me, I just resonated so deeply. Here were people screaming about how I felt, and screaming about the ignorance in the world and the injustice in the world and the, fucked up hippie, generation, and what a failure that was. And no offense to you aging hippies, but that, like, for me, it was that's just what resonated to me. In the punk scene, I found different, it was booze and weed, but then we started taking speed. There's cross tops and crank, and I was very fortunate in the little town that I grew up in. There was an all ages punk club. I became like a volunteer passing out flyers. So I got into all of the punk shows for free at like 13, 14, 15 years old, and got to see so many of the great bands. And it was a good fucking time. And then I got strung out on crack. and it wasn't very much fun anymore. And I got so addicted to crack that, and I started getting, even to back up, I started getting locked up when I was 11 years old. Actually, when I was 5 years old, I lit a field on fire. And, so I'm like, the consequences, even before I got loaded, I was smoking my mom's cigarettes in the field, and I lit like an acre on fire. And I remember getting taken to the police, the fire department, and like the people in uniforms coming down on me. And then when I was 11, I got arrested by the police. And then when I was in junior high, I got arrested like 5 times. And I was in juvenile. And it was just like the concept, I was still having a good time. And for sure, it was everyone else's fault. Anytime I got in trouble, I was sure that it was the fucking cops, it was society, it was the system, it was the hippies. I love to blame the hippies for all of my problems. You know, it was somebody else's fault. And then I started smoking crack at about 15 years old. And started, you know, by the time I was 16, I was shooting coke and heroin and just strung out and on the street and in and out of juvenile hall. And at 7, you know, as I told you before, I got sober at 17. By the time I was 17, I had felonies, I had suspended sentences, I had, you know, I was looking at, people in my circle on the streets were getting murdered. People that I was using with were murdering people. It was getting very sketchy. You know, it wasn't a teenage keg party. It was, you know, it wasn't an occasional thing. It was a full-on violent lifestyle. And I got sober. I was sitting in juvie, and I got arrested again. I was on probation. I had dirty drug tests, all of that stuff. I'd been sent to AA since I was like in junior high. They started sending me to court, ordering me to AA. I guess since I was 13 years old, I'd been in and out of recovery meetings. But all I saw in the recovery meetings were adults talking about God, and just like two strikes. First of all, adults are the fucking enemy. Second of all, you're some religious nuts. What the fuck are you talking about? God will restore you to sanity. This is some bullshit, you know? Like there's no help for me there, you know? Well, first of all, I was in denial about even being an addict at that time. But even if I wasn't one, because especially on crack, there was so many of these, you know, times where that demoralization, that like the suffering, where I was like, I gotta stop this shit. I need to get some help. I can't stop. At one point, I even called a rehab. My buddy had gone to detox, and he was 18, and I was 17, and I called a detox, and I was like, I need to come in and, you know, dry out. And they're like, sorry, kid, call back when you're 18. We don't help minors, you know? And so I started, you know, but even thinking about wanting help, I couldn't even fathom the 12-step approach, because they're clearly on some Christian path that just wasn't going to make sense to me. And so that last time I got loaded, actually not the last time I got loaded, but when I started my recovery journey, you know, got arrested, and that suicidal ideation kind of came back, or very much came back, where I felt like I always had suicide in my back pocket as the solution if shit gets bad enough. And as I said, drugs and alcohol were a solution for a long time, but then they stopped working, and they started creating more suffering, and not so much alleviating, or just those brief glimpses of freedom from the suffering, but the suffering became more predominant. And so suicide was always an option. And I found myself in the holding cell at the juvenile hall again, knowing that I was going to sit in front of the judge who I'd seen only weeks earlier, who said, if I see you again, you're going to prison for 7 years. And so here I am back just weeks later with a new felony charge. So I was like, I'm going away for a long time. And so I decided I'll just kill myself. I'll just end it. I'll end it here. I'm a failure at life, and I'll stop living. And I didn't have any, you're in a cell. It's hard to kill yourself when you're locked up, especially when you're a drunken 17-year-old, like I wasn't smart enough to like make a noose out of my sheets or the cool shit you see in the movies. So what I did was I started banging my head against the concrete wall, thinking like, I was like running and headbutting the cinder blocks. I'll break my head open and, and I don't know if I was too drunk. This was like 11 a.m. and I'm drunk, and it was like morning and I'm drunk, and I got arrested breaking into a car. And I don't know if I was too drunk to break my head open, not drunk enough to break my head open. If the body won't actually let you hit your head intentionally hard enough to actually split your skull open, I'm not sure what was, but all I was getting was lumps on my head and a little like, Anyways, they saw me harming myself in that way. And they put me in the padded cell on kind of suicide watch. And I woke up in that cell in May 10th of 1988. And it occurred to me, I think for the first time in my life, that I got myself into this mess. I'm the one doing the crimes, taking the drugs. Nobody's forcing me to do this. It's not the fact that I got caught. That's not why I'm here. I'm here based on my actions. And I took some response, and I really I think it feels like on some level, I might be being dramatic, and you know how memory is, but it feels like for the first time in my life, I took responsibility for my actions. And with that came a tremendous amount of shame, because when I was avoiding responsibility, then I didn't have to really feel all of the shame and regret for all of the actions, for the fact that I stole my mother's jewelry and her wedding ring and traded it for crack, and all of the people that I hurt and all of the crimes that I committed and all of the dishonesty. But it all kind of came flooding back when I was like, I did this. This is not everyone else's fault. Certainly, I felt like, and I still feel like, as a young punk, I had some discernment about the injustice in this world, and about police brutality and corruption, and about racism and sexism and homophobia. And I had some, I had a good punk rock education about injustice, which resonated with my feelings. And all of that being true, living in a broken system, living in a racist society, living in a, is not why I'm drinking and using. That's not an excuse. It's not, right? It's not for me, it's not cutting it anymore. And so with that shame, with that regret, with that remorse, also came hope. If I got because I felt so stuck, and when we're stuck in that victim mentality, then there's no hope, because we're victims. And that's how I felt. Like I felt like such a victim, a product of my environment, But then when I took some responsibility, I was like, oh wait, if I got myself here, if I got myself strung out, if I got myself locked up, maybe I could do something about it. Maybe there's some hope. Maybe there's an exit strategy. Maybe there's help to be had. Maybe there's a path out because I created this path in. So maybe there's a path out. Now, looking at long-term incarceration isn't very hopeful. But what happened was I was talking to my dad on the phone. You know, the fucking bastard couldn't come actually visit me. He just called me. But he called me, you know, he lived in New Mexico. I was in California, and he called me and I said, Dad, I need some fucking help. I don't think I'd ever asked my dad for help before. And he said, okay, here's what you got to do. Meditate. And I was like, motherfucker, I was talking about a lawyer. I was talking about some real help. You want me to meditate? Okay, I'll meditate. I'm desperate. I'll do anything. And he's like, here's what you do. Pay attention to your breath. He's like, when you're sitting in your cell, breathing in, feel all of the sensations. Breathing out, feel all of the sensations. He's like, and if you can, try to count the breath, breathing in 1, breathing out 2. Just gave me this simple mindfulness of breath meditation instruction. And then was like, yeah, good luck, kid. No lawyer. You'll be okay. So I went back to my cell and I was like so desperate, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to pay attention to my breath. It seems ridiculous, but I'm so desperate. I'll try anything. And I went back to my cell and I started paying attention to my breath, breathing in, breathing out. And it was hard. I couldn't do it very well. It wasn't like all of a sudden everything got better, but it did click for me. And I right away saw, oh, when I pay attention to my breath, I get to ignore my mind. And my mind is taking me to court, is taking me to prison, is taking me to some gang rape scene, you know, like my mind is taking me to all of these terrible future fantasies, scenarios. Or my mind, you know, or all of the regret, the shame, the resentment, the rage, but when I come back to the breath, it cuts through those stories of future and past when I come back to the present. So I got it right away. I couldn't do it very well, and it was only a breath, and then I was back in the future, and I was back in the past, and my mind was all over the place, and I was detoxing in a fucking jail cell, which sucks. But it started a meditation practice for me, where I was like, there's hope here. This is a technique that actually works just a little bit. And so I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep applying this technique. That same week, they came in for 12-step meetings. Both AA and NA institution groups came in. And, you know, for the first time in my life, I started attending 12-step recovery groups voluntarily. I didn't have to go, but I was like, I'm going to go listen. I'm going to go see what they have to say. And I didn't like what they had to say very much. But the guys that were there were pretty cool. And actually, one of the guys that came in for the meeting, the AA meeting, I used to smoke crack with him and his brother. And he was clean. And his brother had just gone to prison for murder in a situation that I was a little too close to. And so that was helpful. Like they were talking, you know, I didn't, you know, they're reading how it works and steps and traditions and stuff, and I didn't like it. You know, it all of that theistic language, however open-minded it was, just pushed the wrong buttons in me. It just felt, you know, like this doesn't feel realistic. This doesn't feel practical. This feels like they're talking about some fantasy, make-believe God stuff. It just doesn't. How's that shit gonna help me? But the people were cool and friendly, and I knew I needed help, so I went back the next week, and And I ended up in a group home. And I got fortunate, lucky, whatever. They didn't give me the suspended sentence. The judge that I saw said, look, you're going to be 18 in 9 months, 8 months, whatever it was. We're just going to take you off the street. We're just going to put you in this youth home, and you're going to live there till you're 18. And then if you fuck up when you're 18, you're going to jail. You're going to prison. And good luck. And so I was locked up for a few months, and then I was in this group home for a few months, and I relapsed once or twice, maybe. I wasn't sure if I was an alcoholic. I was like, I know I'm a crackhead. I know I'm a dope fiend, like, but booze is like an appetizer, like that's the shit you drink in the morning to get ready to go get dope. Like that's not a main course. I'm not sure if I'm an alcoholic. That's the stuff you drink at night to get to sleep. That's like, before and after actual getting loaded. And so I tried to do some controlled drinking, and I heard in AA, I think that they said, if you're not sure to your innermost self that you're a real alcoholic, try some controlled drinking. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to see. Could I just have a couple beers? What would that be like? Who ever heard of trying to stop drinking once you've started? I'd never even experimented with trying to stop before. So I was like, let me try this. And then I started drinking, and that phenomena of craving, and in my head saying like, stop, 2 beers, stop. And my mind going like, the other side of my mind or my body, that craving just going like, I can't stop now. Like you put something in motion, you're drinking, you got to keep drinking. Which of course, obviously I'm a fucking addict and alcoholic, no difference. That was sometime in August of 1988 after I'd been in the group home for a little bit. And so I never drank again. I never used again. I went back to the meetings. I got a sponsor. I didn't work the steps for a while. And, what happened was I had a meditation practice, and it was the only thing that I felt like really was giving me any relief. I worked the 12 steps, but it depends on, I was willing. I was like, okay, you want me to come to believe? You want me to turn it over? You want me to do? I was like, okay, like what? Tell me what to do. I'll fucking do it. But I never came to believe. I said the prayers. I, did the inventories. I went to the meetings. I still go to the meetings 32 years later. But I never came to believe in God. I probably at some point I became a bit agnostic. I was like, okay, well, let's see. I'm open-minded. Let's see. But actually, the longer I stayed sober and the more I studied Buddhism and Hinduism, and I even read the fucking Bible and the Quran and all, I did a sort of like comparative religious studies program on my own because I got it. There's a spiritual solution. That made sense to me. There is, meditation works, service works, humility works, this shit works. But God, that doesn't make any sense to me. Never really made any sense. And also I'm a little bit of a literalist. So no matter how open-minded those nice 12-step fellows were saying God as you understand him, higher power, I know what the fuck they're talking about. And no matter how many people said your higher power can be a doorknob and your higher power can be the tides in the ocean or all of that bullshit, I was like, okay, fine, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about God, the God that human beings created to make sense of all of this shit. That's what they're talking about. So I really threw myself into Buddhist practice because that's what made the most sense to me. I found in Buddhism, and again, I worked the 12 steps, I participated, I had sponsors, I sponsored people, I was engaged, but really it was Buddhism that made the most sense to me. And so I started going on meditation retreats. I started studying with teachers. I started being very serious and diligent about this non-theistic Buddhist awakening path, healing path, forgiveness meditations, compassion meditations, not just mindfulness that I had started with of ignoring my mind, but mindfulness of paying attention to my mind and seeing I don't want to get into a whole Dharma talk right now with you guys, but starting to just see what's actually happening in here, and that I had some agency over how reactive I am, that I could choose to disengage, that I could choose to replace resentment thoughts with forgiveness thoughts. And Buddhism taught me this. And it was, a lot of stuff that I wasn't learning in 12-step rooms. But I had this dilemma of the Buddhists are lame. I don't want to hang out with any of them. There's not one cool person in the whole fucking room. It's my dad's hippie friends and a bunch of do-gooders that don't listen to Motorhead, and they're not my people. They're kind, loving people. And I'm grateful for their kindness and their love. But I'm like, I want people, I want community. I want fellowship. And in the recovery rooms, fellowship, a bunch of fucking addicts like me that I could relate to, and of course our recovery communities, what do they say in the 12 step? They say that, we're a group of people who wouldn't normally mix. Of course that's true, but there's a whole bunch of my people in the room. And there's a whole bunch of people that can relate to the suffering that we've been through, and that happen to have, similar generational, there was a lot of young people in AA in the 80s and 90s where I got sober. And, so I continued with the fellowship, but philosophically and practically, Buddhism became my path, and my recovery path, and my spiritual path, and my way of life. And that continues. And, the process of recovering, in my experience, is a slow one and gradual, and that there's so much underlying, like just stopping using is just the beginning. Certainly it's not enough. We all know that. Like there's so much healing to be done after we get sober. Like getting sober is fucking brutal, but it's not enough. And I hated myself and I hated everyone else. And I had to do years of forgiveness meditation and loving kindness meditation, and making amends to everyone that I had caused harm to was helpful in that recovery process. I'm a big believer in direct amends and taking full responsibility when we, when our suffering spills out onto others. And I started going, I feel, on the kind of gratitude kick, I'm grateful that I'm an addict. I'm grateful that drugs and alcohol like saved my life before I'm grateful for this addictive quality that I have, because it's also what got me to do more and more intensive meditation practices and stronger forms of renunciation. You know, when I started meditating in juvie and I got a little bit of relief from it, I was like, this is great. I'm going to do this over and over and over because I'm a fucking addict. This works just a little bit. I'm going to keep doing it. And then I went on a meditation retreat and I was like, this fucking sucks. Silent, no eye contact, no, no entertainment, no books, no, like, I was like, this is terribly painful, but it works a little bit. I'm finding a little bit of freedom here. I'm finding a little bit more space for, I'm seeing a little bit more clearly the impermanent nature of how my moods, how I'm like so angry at one point of the day, and then I'm doing a walking meditation, I'm fucking fine. I'm learning from this and I want to learn more, and I'm getting a little bit of freedom and I want more freedom. And of course I had to become imbalanced, and I had to go vegan, celibate, sugar-free, I had to go all the way, no nicotine, no caffeine, no animal products, no, and then also judgmental, critical and judgmental of like, yeah, you fuckers, you're not really sober, smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. You might as well be shooting dope. I had to go, into that imbalanced 20-something, judgmental, vegan, attitude. And it took me a little while to come back. And I also went from like, fuck all spirituality, religion is for sheep, to like, I'm gonna get enlightened. Like, and that, maybe it's male, maybe it's human, kind of like, and it's a competition. I'm gonna get enlightened first. I'm gonna be the most spiritual motherfucker in every room I walk into. And just like how the ego took a hold of these great spiritual practices, and the shit that was saving my life, but just in an imbalanced way. And then, hopefully at some point, my 20s, I went off to Asia and thought I'd become a monk, and went to the monasteries in Thailand and Burma. And I had met this monk. It was one of my main continues to the last 30 years, this Buddhist monk who's an English guy who ordained in Thailand. And I went to a retreat with him when I was about 19 or 20, over 30 years ago. And I was like, I should just do that. Like, I'm gonna go be a celibate Buddhist monk. Like, I want to get enlightened. That's the best way to get enlightened. And went off on pilgrimage and being in those monasteries, part of it was just my craving, my attachment, but some of it was just this feeling. I just had this feeling of like, this isn't right for me. I actually want to be in the world. I want to be of service. I want to have a family. I want to use my life's energy to create change in my subculture, in the punk scene. I want to help addicts. I don't want to be over here in this monastery living in a hut in the jungle. I want to be in the world, and I want to wake up in the world, and I also had this core feeling that I had. I know I had a lot of relational wounds, and I just knew those relational wounds need to be healed in relationships. And so I gave up the fantasy of celibate liberation and monasticism for me. I just decided I'm going to be in the world, I'm going to be a householder. And I came back, and at some point my teachers said, we want you to start teaching. My father, who was a teacher, he's like, you should go back into. I started bringing 12-step meetings into juvie, and then I started getting encouragement, and I was like, can I teach mindful? Can I teach the kids how to meditate rather than just doing the meeting format? And they're like, yeah, sure, teach them to meditate. Great. You're one of our success stories. You're one of our few success stories. It's working for you, teach them. I studied with Jack Kornfield for a long time, and he started to encourage me to teach, and my teacher Ajahn Amaro. And so I started teaching, and I went, I had no education. I went back, I went to finish my undergrad, went to grad school, got a degree in psychotherapy, and wrote that first book, Dharma Punx, and just started to, open my doors to people who wanted to learn meditation. And then what we call Sangha in Buddhism, it grew, and to hundreds of people, and half of them were in recovery already and coming but half of them weren't in recovery, and were just suffering from other manifestations, not addiction. And so I made a conscious decision at that time to not say this is just for addicts, but to say this is a Buddhist community that's open to everyone. Everyone's welcome. But more and more people said, hey, we're trying to use this thing as our addiction recovery. We're trying to use the Sangha. We don't love the 12 steps. We don't want to talk about God. Buddhism makes more sense to us. And so eventually, after having created communities in San Francisco, and then I lived in New York for a while, and then I came to Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, I started to create a Buddhist recovery program that we call Refuge Recovery. And that was about 10 years ago. And so over 10 years ago, I think I started that in 2008, so 12 years ago. And now Refuge Recovery exists. Kimberly's holding up the book. And there's hundreds of meetings, all over the country. And it's awesome. It's fucking awesome. I love, I created the thing that I wanted to be part of, where I can go to a meeting and we meditate in every meeting. There's a guided meditation led by the peers in the meeting. And then we have a conversation about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and these in-depth inventories that we do. And it's the conversation that I always wanted to have. And you do something like this, we'd let's see who else is interested. And as it turns out, thousands of people are interested in this conversation and interested in having a non-theistic spiritual path that Buddhism offers. Now, I know my time's almost up. I want to end with my kind of current, where I'm at these days. A couple years ago, right before I was turning 30 years sober, that Pema Chodron, when things fall apart. It really felt like I just lived this. Things were so good. I had gotten married. I had 2 kids. My marriage fell apart. My wife, had an affair, and it just my marriage fell apart. My father died. My father killed himself at the end of his life in a way that wasn't skillful. He didn't, communicate appropriately with people what was going on. And my community was, from my perspective, sort of. Now, I'm going to say this, but before I say this, I want to say I probably also was I felt fucking great. I was having the best time of my life. And I felt like I'm helping so many people. This is great. And I opened the book Refuge. I had a treatment center, and there was 5 meditation centers and groups all over. I felt great. I felt like this is what I wanted. I want to dedicate my life to service. And I've done this, and it's been so successful. And I felt so great. But I'm sure also I was a bit reckless, and I've always been a bit irreverent, and I know I was unskillful in some ways, for sure. And especially after I got divorced, and all of a sudden I'm famous and single and dating again, and I wasn't really awake to the power dynamics that my status had. I still think I'm a punk rock kid, from the streets. And I don't realize that people are looking at me and I was a bit deluded about how I was being seen. And, and it's delusional. Now I can look back and be like, you're not a fucking punk rock kid from the streets. You're a successful Buddhist meditation teacher that's written all these books and created all of these things. And people are holding you to a higher standard. But I was so rebellious against that. And I believe that what happened in my communities was that there was a real kind of identity politics, cancel culture, sort of, we got to get rid of the straight white guy. We got to take him down. And that's part of the dynamic. Now, partially, I was a bit unskillful in some ways, for sure. But there was a false accusation against me, and the people around me used it to tear down the community. And even in Refuge Recovery, it split the community in half, and all of these folks just sort of like plagiarized the work and went off, and they stole the money from our community and started their own community, and it's really ugly. It was really brutal betrayal. And what an amazing opportunity to be over here, for me, to be over here going like, what the fuck is happening? This is my practice now. I know how to do forgiveness. I know how to do compassion. I know how to do, but it's so confusing because like what was being said was absolutely not true, but it didn't matter. What was actually true didn't matter. The political power, mob mentality just went to the point where it destroyed my treatment center. It split Refuge in half. It closed all of my meditation centers. And then, here I am 30 years into recovery going like, wow, I worked so hard for all of these years to build this stuff, and it just crumbled. It just has crumbled. And really over and over reminding myself to frame this is a opportunity for spiritual practice. This is an opportunity for letting go. And the big question for me, I hope people resonate with this, but the big question for me is like, how much non-attachment, like I'm a Buddhist, I believe in non-attachment, but when does non-attachment become irresponsibility? Right? When are we so non-attached? Because I was sort of in this place of like, well, I'll walk away from everything. Fuck all of you. But actually that would be so irresponsible. I actually feel compelled, passionate about Buddhist recovery, passionate about the Dharma, passionate about continuing to support people in the healing and recovering and awakening, and to just be so non-attached that you walk away because people are lying about you would be irresponsible. So it's been amazing. And it's been so, even this, I'm not totally grateful yet for all of the loss. I mean, my income just like went away, my, this close to bankruptcy, like all of that shit. I lost lifelong friends, my own Dharma teacher totally stabbed me in the back for his own personal gain. There was some really bad, painful shit. So I'm not quite at the place, I don't have enough space from it yet to be like, I'm so grateful that happened. But I am really in the place of, this is my practice. I believe 100% that this is an opportunity for practicing what I preach, for getting free in the midst of big, real life, painful experience. And not drinking, not using, and continuing on a path of as much integrity as I can embody. think that's probably, let me see if I have any closing statements. Anyways, I'm happy. We're going to have some Q&A. If there's anything that I've said that people want to dig into, if you want to know more about Refuge, of course, I'm happy, so happy to tell you about Refuge and invite you to come check out some of the Zoom meetings that we're doing. And Refuge is alive and well, and there's, you know, over 100 meetings, and people are so welcome to check that out if you haven't already. And, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Yay.
Kimberly.
Yay. Thank you, Noah. Let's all clap for Noah. It's the silent clap.